Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today on this exciting topic. This is one that I've thought about doing for a long time, and I can see a few of you are in a different time zone, so I'll catch you on the replay. So just wanting to send love to our soul tribe. And please do remember to hit that like, share, subscribe button as well. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Tim, for the reminder. So we're going to be unlocking the CIA gateway technique. And I'm also going to be talking about the missing page 25, that wasn't in the original document that was declassified. So anyway, this whole process went down in 1983, and I will be screen sharing and bringing some more info as well. And we'll be talking at the end, really recapping and looking at what we can do to activate these things within us, or what it is that we can do to achieve similar states. So yeah, do stick around to go through everything. It's going to be a really interesting dive. Let me just see. Hey, John, thank you for joining us as well. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about brain synchronization with this as well. So I'm just going to go to one of my little windows. And this is a little video that will just give us a little rundown, because I do love, sometimes you'll find some really good explanations. So this one, let me just put my sound. Okay, so here's a little explanation just to intro us.
CIA paper titled Assessment of the Gateway Process. Basically, this paper tells you that our entire universe is a hologram. This paper was written as an assessment of the work of Dr. Robert Monroe. Dr. Robert Monroe was a radio broadcaster who realized something strange about our brain and how it responds to frequency. So our brains have two hemispheres, the left and the right, but they both respond to stimuli differently and frequency differently. But what he realized is if you can get them to harmonize and work together, then your entire body starts to work in this very unified way, where now you start to tap into these energy fields around you, and you can induce lucid dreaming, you can induce astral projection, and you can actually leave your body and start to traverse these other dimensions that exist around us. There was a CIA paper titled Assessment of the Gateway Process.
That one. So that's a really great explanation from that channel, which you could see the details that I had on there, just explaining a little bit about what you can achieve. So we're going to go over the things to do with that today. So anyway, the reason that this all came about was they were looking for if this could be perhaps used. And I did watch Men Who Stare at Goats. I hadn't watched it in like 10 years or so. So I did rewatch that again last night. And after reading the report a few times through, which, you know, being dyslexic as well, trying to absorb this and trying to hold this in here can be a little bit challenging. So I've got lots of notes and things to get through. But I found that I saw that movie in a whole different light. So you could see a lot more of the truths, and I'm getting a high pitch come through as I'm talking about that. So it might be interesting to rewatch that movie, Men Who Stare at Goats, after talking about this subject today. But essentially, the reason that I wanted to explore this topic is with our channel, and I call it our channel, our soul tribe, I do really want to explore how we can step outside and create our own reality. So this study that they did really fits the topic of how we can manifest, how we can create our own reality. So let me just bring up a window, and if you want to read along with me, feel free to do so. I'm just gonna, that's another little pic I've got saved that I made for you guys. So here we are. So this is, and I'll zoom in and make this a little bit bigger and bring this across. Okay, so this document is approved for release in 2003. So this was actually from June 19th, 1983, and it was to the commander of the US Army Operational Group in Fort Meade. So it says, number one, you tasked me to provide an assessment of the gateway experience. So the gateway experience comes from the Monroe Institute, where they're teaching this brain entrainment, they're teaching meditation and things. So in terms of its mechanics and ultimately practicality, As I set out to fulfill the task of tasking it, soon became clear that in order to assess the validity and the practicality of the process, I needed to do enough supporting research and analysis to fully understand how and why this process works. Frankly, sir, that provided to be extremely involved and difficult business, which you will see and gather when you read this as well. So initially based on the conversation with the physician who took the gateway training with me, I had the resource to biomedical models developed by Istan Bentov to obtain information concerning the physical aspects of the process. Then I found it necessary to delve into various sources for information concerning quantum mechanics in order to be able to describe the nature and functioning of the human consciousness. So I had to be able to construct a scientifically valid, reasonable, lucid model of how consciousness functions under the influence of the brain hemispheres synchronization technique employed by the gateway. Once this was done, the next step involved recourse to theoretical physics in order to explain the character of the time-space dimension and the means by which explained human consciousness transcends it in achieving the gateway's objectives. Finally, I again found it necessary to use the physics to bring the whole phenomenon of out-of-body states into the language of physical science to remove the stigma of its occult connections and put it into a frame suited to be objective assessment. So, number 2, I began the narrative by briefly profiling the fundamental biomedical factors affecting such related techniques as hypnosis, biofeedback, and transcendental meditation, so that their objective and mode of functioning could compare in the reader's mind with the gateway experience as the model of its underlying mechanics was developed. Additionally, that introductory material is used in supporting the conclusion of the paper. I indicate that at times they related techniques may provide useful entry points to accelerate movement into the gateway experience. And then we see Niels Bohr, the renowned physicist, once responded to his son's complaint about the obtruse nature of certain concepts in physics by saying, "You are not thinking, but are merely being logical." So we're going to talk more about the brain and logic and the right brain and that creative ability to tap into what they call in the gateway and in this document, the absolute, which is pretty much consciousness. And we think about it as something out there, or we think about it as the quantum field. And so this is something that using the gateway technique, you can interact with a little bit more and start to program out into this. So it says here as well, so to borrow from Dr. Bohr's mode of expression, parts of this paper will require not only logic, but a touch of right brain intuitive insight to achieve a complete, comfortable grasp of concepts involved. So nevertheless, once that is done, I'm confident that their construction and application will stand to the rest of rational critique. Paradoxically, having gone into such great lengths to avoid trying to render judgments based on an occult or dogmatic frame for reference in the end, I found it necessary to return, at least briefly, to the question of the impact of the gateway experience on common belief systems. I did so because, as though it is an essential to avoid that is necessarily, after having completed the analysis to the point of the resulting conclusions, do not do any violence to fundamental mainstream, neither Eastern or Western belief systems, unless that point is so clearly established. The danger exists that some people will reject the whole concept of the gateway experience in the mistaken belief that it contradicts and therefore alien to what we hold to be right and true. So number 5, this study is certainly not designed to be the last word on the subject, but I hope that the validity of the basic structure of the fundamental concepts upon which it will be based will make it useful guide for the USA INSCOM personnel who are required to take the gateway training on work with the materials. So let me just jump back to my other screen. So thank you for joining us. I'm excited to have some Soul Tribe here with us. So yeah, looking at this and, looking at why they would perhaps fund people to go and take the gateway process. Now, keep in mind that this is just one fraction or one technique that may have been explored. So I wonder what other techniques were also explored. There is more of a background information around transcendental meditation, biofeedback, and other things too. So let me just see what I've got in my notes, because I do want to go through this. So I'll just bring this back up. Oh, and I'll just see if I've missed anything from here. Oh, and I also want to state too that, with this declassified paper being released in 2003, the things that they were able to achieve in it, it does make you wonder that in 2024, where we might be at all these years later. And a lot of this is also based on ancient techniques. So I think in order to understand and to see where they could possibly be today, I think if we keep our mind that foot in the past, and looking into like what past people have learned, whether it's the yogis or people practicing Kundalini work, it would be really interesting that they perhaps might already have the answers. So I don't think we need to go too far into the future with this. Let me just see what else I've written. And I will bring up my little window again. And you might hear my kids singing in the background. I can hear them in the other room. So anyway, I'll go over this quickly, unless there was different things. So we've got the intro. And this, if you're looking for it, just type in analysis and assessment of the gateway process, and you'll be able to find it. In the second one, we do see here them talking about hypnosis. So this is also going into the left and the right brain hemispheres, comparing gateway techniques to hypnosis. So he's really just giving you a rundown on hypnosis, how hypnosis works, just to sort of give you a little bit of an understanding. It does go into talking about the homunculus, which is one of the inner parts of our brain, which is also referred to as the little man. This is also where we sort of receive like sensory information and things. You'll often see, if you type in homunculus brain, a brain with like a big eye and ear and different things to represent the senses. The other thing that we see here is they also compare it to transcendental meditation. So with this, what they found was the gateway experience seemed to surpass these types of practices, or it tend to get you much further in a quicker, shorter distance. So you can see here as well, they've got like a little model of the brain. And here's this little picture. If you look towards more the sensory cortex homunculus on this little back picture here on figure 8, you'll see where it's got like a face with a tongue and the digestive system and things as well. We also see there's a lateral view of the brain where it's got the third ventricle, the motor cortex, sensory cortex, lateral ventricles, and the frontal lobe as well. So yeah, it does go into a bit more of the science, just so you can reference it back. And you'll see here, let me just see as well. Just making sure we're going through things that I've got highlighted. Okay, so let me skip forward to, we've got the Kundalini and psychosis of transcendence. So one thing I did highlight, where was it? Around here, where I'm sort of scrolling, I don't know if you guys can see. Let me bring it to the top of the page. So although normally a period of meditation involves concentration, a practice of 5 years or some are required to bring up Kundalini. So Bentoff states that exposure to mechanical or acoustic vibrations in the range of 4 to 7 hertz cycles per second for protracted periods may achieve the range of the same effect. So Bentoff cites an example of repeating riding in a car with the suspension and the seat combination produce a range of vibrations. So, or being exposed to long periods of time for frequencies caused, for instance, by the air conditioning. He also notes that the cumulative effect of these vibrations might be able to trigger a spontaneous psycho Kundalini sequence. So in susceptible people who have particularly sensitive nervous systems. So this is where, like at the end of it, I will sum it up and try and bring it together into a practice that you guys can use to induce these sorts of states. But essentially what it's trying to convey to us here when you read the whole thing together is your brain, when you play at different frequencies, or even if you step into more of a yogi type practice where you hum, your brain will will actually synchronize with that vibration, and you'll see your brainwave shift and change. So what he's sort of talking about, like with the hum of the car and different things too, there's different frequencies sometimes that can be subjective from our outside influence that can have an effect on our brain too. And I have looked into this with, I'm trying to think of what it was. There's a device that's the guy who does the Museum of Tarot, and I've showed it on my other shows before. I actually had a quick look before, and I don't remember where I've placed it. But essentially, it's a little halo that you wear, and it's hooked up to an Arduino little computer device, and it actually will play the hertz frequencies similar to what's talked about here. And what that's meant to do is trigger your brain to go into a synchronized, heightened awareness state, or like deeper levels of consciousness. So there are external devices you can wear. You can also do, and John, thank you for my device. We've got the heart math devices that you can also use as well. So these are really good for getting heart-brain coherence. Essentially, what you want to establish, like why we're reading this too, is thinking about brain synchronization of the hemispheres. And let me just bring up why we're talking about this. I did make a little slide. So this cute little brain, we see the left I've represented as psychic circuits and little more logical computer kind of data looking pic. And then I've done the right in like a creative one. So yeah, our left is more logic. The right brain is more connected to the universe, or what they call in this document and in the gateway, the absolute. And that's more the creative side. So essentially, when we're going over all of this, it's think about how can we quieten this monkey mind or this logic. So the logic is more kind of sifting through information and looking for facts and looking for data. And it's more likely to discard things that the right brain would be open to. So think about the right brain being like where we're tapped in like a creative child, because they're so right brain. And in a lot of us that are neurodivergent or ADHD are almost like in alignment with the way that the mystics of the past would have worked. So I do have the missing page as well, and they do talk about mystics in this. So think about when we're more in the right brain, we're more open to the mystical, and we're more likely to have a mystical experience as well. So I've put little headphones on this brain because that does talk about in the gateway experience where they're playing this frequency, and we see that referenced in what I just read as well. So with this, it brings the brain into synchronization. This is more where we're able to tap in and get out into that holographic universe. So also keep in mind that a lot of this model that we're going to refer back to today is holographic. So I'm trying to get as in-depth as we can. We will come back maybe to the brainwaves, but just know that we're going to cover this. So where we're at now is the biofeedback section. So I wanted to go in and just sort of talk about things that stood out. So one thing that also stood out was biofeedback. And remember, I'm a kinesiologist, so we work really strongly with biofeedback. So anyway, biofeedback teaches the left hemisphere first to visualize the desired result, and then to recognize the feelings associated with the experience of the successful right brain hemisphere access to specific lower cerebral cortex, pain or pleasure or other areas in that manner needed to produce the desired result. And I'll just check where I've highlighted to. So special self-monitoring devices such as the digital thermometer are used to inform the left brain when it succeeds in keying in the right hemisphere into accessing the appropriate area. So once this is done, the left brain can repeatedly instruct the right brain to reestablish the pathways so that they can produce the same external objective measures for success. So in this way, the pathways are strengthened and emphasized to the extent that the left brain consciousness is enabled to access the appropriate areas of the right brain using the consciousness demand mode. So essentially you're calming this left brain, but you can still tap in to be the director, if that makes sense. The other thing I want to bring up is my other little window. So my poor little book got a little bit water damage standing on my nightstand. It's still surviving. I just had a glass like shatter and break. I have no idea how, but I woke up to it shattered overnight. So I wonder what happened, because it was not like that when I went to sleep. But yeah, breaking the habit of being yourself. So Dr. Joe, he really explores this getting out into the quantum field. And we really cannot access new things from the level of where we're already at. So in order to not be attached to the past, which is patterning and creating our present, and it's also creating and broadcasting our future. So when we look into doing practices like the gateway, and when we're taking control of the monkey mind and the logic, and we're tapping out into that quantum potential, just think about that and how some of the modern day works like Dr. Joe will also help you to get a greater understanding of how the brain works and how we're accessing the quantum, or what they call in this document, the absolute. And they also talk about it being like a hologram. So let's get further into this. And I can see Soul Family here. Thank you, Soul Tribe, for joining us. So let me just bring this back up. So the next thing that I had highlighted to talk to you guys about was where it starts to get into the gateway. So I've put here, and I'm just going to read from my highlighted document. So this is really what I was just saying about brain synchronization, and we're getting out into the quantum. So it says here, fundamentally, the gateway experience is a training system designed to bring enhanced strength, focus, and coherence to the amplitude and frequency of brain output between the left and right hemispheres. So this is to alter consciousness, moving it outside the physical and the physical sphere, as to ultimately escape into the restrictions of time and space. So this participant then gains the access to various levels of intuitive knowledge, which the universe offers. So this, again, we're thinking about it from being a mystic. You're tapping into a level of consciousness that you might be receiving or bringing back down with higher self as well. So it says here, what differentiates the gateway experience from other forms of meditation is to use the hemisync technique, which defined in monograph by Monroe Institute trainer Melissa Jagger as the state of consciousness defined where the EEG pattern of both hemispheres are simultaneously equal to the in amplitude and in frequency. So although hemisync seems to be rather rare and only in short duration of the ordinary human consciousness. And then they go on to talk about like the tapes used. And I first came across these tapes. It would have been early 2000s. Maybe I'm trying to think how old my daughter would be, because I measure things by the kids' ages. It might have been perhaps like around like 2003 or so. I think she was maybe like 3-4 years old. So yeah, a long time ago now. They do really work. For anyone wondering like whether it's worth trying them, they definitely do work. I haven't done like the whole program or the whole process. Anyway, essentially what it states, and I'll just bring it to the top. So what they found is essentially you can learn in a short distance of time to train or to be like a Zen monk, to go into that space and to sort of switch into that. So that's what you could expect to have come out of it. So in Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, he talks about, I'm just going to bring up another slide, the gamma wave. So when they have people hooked up to the brainwave measuring software, or like the little EEG measuring brainwaves, and what you find is in meditation. So say, for example, this little pale orange color that I have here, this is our everyday waking consciousness. So it's beta. So this is where we're just going about doing the things, I think it's, oh, thank you, John. So yeah, 2003. And I remember you could send off for like a free CD to experience like a taste or a test of it. And I remember playing the introductory one when I was doing, or when I was like having my other kids. So it really does put you into like a deep hypnotic Zen-like state. So it is really good. And I'll play, there's a little sample on the website that we'll come to as well. But yeah, just know that like your beta brain is like your everyday kind of, we're in hypnosis, or we might be watching TV. Not that many of us do that here, YouTube though, I would say. And then, when we get into meditations, we start to explore these deep theta waves. So I've got here with the beta, alertness, concentration, thinking. So even sometimes driving a car, although we do find that we can slip into where we're in like a daydream, theta-like state sometimes, and not remember like how we got to the end. And you've got alpha, which is meditation, creativity, relaxation. So we tend to feel pretty good when we get into alpha. When we get into theta, and you'll see I've put the little hertz difference. When we get into theta, this is like when we're in visualization, trance, or we're dreaming. So with delta, you see like the waves start to change. Now, remember I've talked about on other shows, we're talking about with manifestation becoming less particle and more wave. So look at the waves as we're saying this as well. And as we drop deeper into the delta, you see how like the wave starts to stretch out. So deep sleep, transcendental restoration. So this is more what you're likely to experience with the gateway as well, is that transcendental like meditation state. Now with Dr. Joe's work, what they've found when they've hooked people up and they become master meditators, because you do, I think it's around 6 hours a day. And John and I are about to experience this later this year. I can't wait. We're going on the adventure of a lifetime to a Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat. So we're super excited. But yeah, what they find is that people are hitting gamma. And so what they're experiencing, sometimes we're in these states of gamma, is waves of like love or bliss or kundalini activation. Some of them are experiencing orgasms, and some of them are fully detaching from like their local version of itself, and just experiencing the absolute would be what I would refer it to if we're talking about this document. So yeah, this is where healing happens. It's where we're unbecoming our past. We're unbecoming disease and illness. We're unbecoming our personalities, our moods, and our little habits. So I thought that's really interesting when we look into this. But when we bring it back into a quantum physics, more kind of holographic mode, and we talk about what it is that might perhaps break us out of the wave collapsing, because when we're looking into the particle and we want to become more wave, as Dr. Joe talks about, there's also like a model in quantum physics where they talk about, collapsing this wave. And we will talk about, there's a little graph that I'll bring up where the Monroe Institute talks about clicking out. So there's different phases that will modulate to with the hertz frequencies that are being played, and you'll click out. So I will be bringing that little diagram up too. But essentially what I've been postulating and thinking about on my meditative walks the last few days is how can we collapse this wave? And with this, what I keep coming back to is to get into gamma as much as we can. That I really feel that we're tapping into creative right brain inspiration, and we're becoming less attached to what it is that we're working with. So we're more opening the vortex to the universe and our higher self actually bringing us the solutions and the answers. So that's, one way I've been getting downloads around with this. I haven't read this one yet, but there's a lot of interesting information about the holographic universe. I have heard with it, and the things that I have read to do with it, and have heard other, YouTubers and that talk about too, is that there tends to be more of a restrictive mindset around the holographic universe, or more of kind of a fixed frame that some of it is working with. Hey, Kay. Lovely to see you and Lisa here as well. But yeah, I definitely think I will read it in the future. And I think it's good to sort of be almost like empty-minded and really take in like what resonates when we're going through or reading some of this stuff. So let me just bring back up my little window. So the other thing that, it should only take like 15 minutes is what it refers to in here to get into this state, like the Zen monks. And we have lamp versus laser. So essentially, if I'm to shorten that, and I did write a little note on this, let me just find this. So when we're reading like this little part too, it talks about sometimes, like say you have a lamp and it's like diffused light, and it might be on a certain amplitude or a certain wattage. What this technique teaches you how to do with the gateway technique and the Monroe tapes, which is utilizing binaural and hemisync. It teaches you to have your mind like a laser light focus. And I haven't put little references to different headgear and things because I didn't want to be biased, and I'm not sponsored by anyone. This is purely based on experience and things too. But I have seen, I think it's called the focus band. When I was hooked up to that and like tested and challenged and kind of monitored by one of the creators of, or one of the doctors working with that technology, he was really amazed at how I was able, just how I would go into in my brain with like meditation or psychic sessions. He's like, wow, like what you did with your brain is usually like what experienced meditators do. And part of how I felt when I put my brain into that process, when I was being measured and watched, is similar to the gateway technique. So just know that my experience of being hooked up to a device, and I know John has as well, in that we've had brain scan things where you can see, that hemisync take place between the right and the left hemispheres. So the other thing that I noticed with my brainwave and my focus on the focus band was that I was able to tap into a deeper, like higher state, but I was able to focus my mind at the same time. So it's like in two different brainwave states, and that is said to be impossible. I have also seen, I think it was Tyler Henry, the psychic medium. He was hooked up to brainwave technology, as was, I think, John Edwards and the Long Island medium. And the work of Dr. Daniel Amen is really interesting for anyone interested more in the neuroscience and brainwaves and looking into the science behind things. But essentially, everyone had sort of similar results in that they could be in two states of consciousness at once, or two different brainwave states, which was, said to be impossible. So anyway, so the human mind in its natural state might be likened to an ordinary lamp. It expands energy in the form of both heat and light, but it's chaotic. So it's an incoherent way that diffuses energy over a wider range of, rather than a limited depth. So in here, this is teaching the mind to pinpoint focus, to bring a coherence, and to create like a laser light function. Also, it says such meaning is usually perceived visually in the form of symbols, and also perceived as astonishing flashes or holistic intuition that can be used in this form. So that was another interesting thing right down the bottom of that little paragraph. And let me just see where we're at. So going into number 7, this is talking about frequency, and it's talking about like objectively, talking about theory with the binaural side of things. So frequency following response. So essentially, if I was to sum this up, because there's so much to get through, the parts that I've highlighted here is where frequencies which approximate brainwave output at a theta level, the subject's brains will endeavor to alter its brainwave pattern from the normal beta into the theta. So again, coming back to this little thing. So going from beta, remember, alert, concentrated thinking, into theta, visualization, trance, dreaming-like states. So with this, I've also put here, so this is essentially like being asleep, but you're awake. So you're in that same sort of state. And so the brain strives to entrain this into a wave frequency output that the person is hearing. So when they're playing that frequency to calm that left brain and to get our brain to go sort of sleep, and we can heighten that creativity. So it's just quieting the monkey mind. So in the human brain is exposed to the frequency, and let me see. So we're reading around here. I've just got highlighted one, much easier being a bit neurodivergent to read off my own notes. So with my scribble on the side. So if the human brain is exposed to one frequency in rather than direct, or one frequency in the left ear, which is at 10 hertz below another audible frequency played in the right ear, rather than hearing either of the two audible frequencies, the brain chooses to hear the difference between them. So even some of you have heard and experienced where I played the crystal singing bowls, and you'll find sometimes there's two bowls that you can play at the same time, and they seem to create almost like a synchronized frequency between. When I play the bowls in that way, that's when I notice my brain goes into this kind of hemisync experience. So you can drop out, is what it feels like, of just your normal waking mind. So yeah, it's really interesting how our brain will make up the difference. And we see this with visual things all the time, that our brain will try and make up different things. And this is where being dyslexic, you might, and my kids and I, especially my daughter, will be driving somewhere and we'll read dyslexically a really funny sign. And then we'll read it in our rereading state. We're like, oh, that didn't say like what I thought it was at all. But our creative minds are like really overactive. So we come up with some hilarious things of what we think, because our brain will replace it. So anyway, the objective here was to relax the hemisphere of the brain, place the physical body into a virtual sleep-like state, bringing the left and the right hemispheres into coherence under conditions designed to promote production of even higher amplitude of frequency brain output. So that is fascinating. We also have the role of resonance, which I didn't really highlight anything in that. You guys can really read over and go through like in depth. Where I do want to jump forward to, and we see brain stimulation, sorry. And we see energy entrainment, which sort of got into a little bit on how our body or energy will start to assimilate or uptake things. Consciousness and energy. So the first point which needs to be made is the first two terms, matter and energy, tend to be misleading if taken to indicate two distinctive states of existence into the physical world that we know it. Indeed, this term of matter is to mean solid substance, and opposed energy, which would be misleading. So, hold on a sec. Former entirely misleading. Science now knows that both the electrons which spin in the energy field located around the nucleus and the atom of the nucleus itself are made up of nothing more than oscillating energy grids. Solid matter, in the strict construction of the term, simply does not exist. And that's why we want to learn this stuff. That's why we want to, gain these amazing superpowers, which are part of our fundamental birthright. So rather than an atomic structure, it is composed of oscillating energy grids surrounded by other than oscillating energy grids, which orbit extraordinary speeds. And so it's got like books and things that you can reference. It talks about holograms as well. So we have energy centers and stores, which retrieves meaning of the universe projected or expanding at certain frequencies in third dimensional mode that creates a living pattern called a hologram. So the concept of the hologram can be most easily understood by using exact cited by Bentoff. So in which he asks the reader to visualize a bowl full of water in which 3 pebbles are dropped. And I did find a lot of content creators really went over this. I didn't actually highlight it in what I was drawn to. So it's great, like have a look into other people's videos too. But essentially he's highlighting dropping these 3 pebbles into water. So they create ripples by the simultaneous entry of these 3 pebbles. They radiate, that ring of energy outwards. So Bentoff further asks the reader to visualize that the surface of the water is suddenly flash frozen so that the ripple pattern is preserved instantaneously. So the ice is removed, leaving 3 pebbles still lying at the bottom of the bowl. So then the ice is exposed to a powerful coherent source, such as light, like a laser. The result being that the 3-dimensional model represents the position of the 3 petals suspended in mid-air. Holograms are capable of encoding so much detail. For example, it is possible to take holographic projection of a glass of swamp water and view it under the magnification to see small organisms not visible to the naked eye. So when when the glass of water itself is examined, the whole concept of holography, despite its scientific implications, has only been known to the physicists since the underlying mathematical principles were worked by Dennis Gabor in 1947. So he also won a Nobel Prize for his work. Anyway, you see here like a little bit more info on that, but essentially when we talk about on this channel we talk about holography, and we talk about, like essentially the acupuncture system in the ear reflects the whole body, or the same in reflexology, whether it's on the palms of the hand or the feet. There's a holographic way. Another way that I can clearly demonstrate or show to you the synchronization of that would be the doctrine of signatures, which we see in nature. So, and I have done a talk on this that is on my YouTube channel. It's under the psychic training, and it's how to eat for, or how to build a psychic brain, I think was the one I talked about for a conference. Anyway, I talk about the doctrine of signatures. So say, for example, we look at a kidney bean. So we know that eating kidney beans is good for our kidneys. Or we look at a carrot. We know that they have, when you take like a slice and it looks like the iris of an eye, and the same with a blueberry, it looks like an eye. So they have antioxidants and they have vitamins that are good for that. So that's an example of a holographic universe. So just keep that in mind when they're talking about our consciousness. And when we can get into this meditative state, we can actually present or project a view of how we want to imprint our hologram, or what it is that we're creating, into the quantum and into the absolute. And we want to impress that upon that quantum field, and then it's going to reflect that back into our life. So just trying to like get the visual for you guys, because it's going to be like really lengthy and wordy. So let me see where we're at. So the purest kind of light is available to us, produced by the laser, which sends out the beam, and which all waves are in that one frequency. So when we're doing this, and we're doing this projecting our hologram, when we're in this coherent state, we're really shortening and bringing together a tighter range. So we have a laser-like focus in projecting our manifestation out. And this is also the same for remote viewing. We're able to utilize and receive frequencies or information a lot easier. So a little bit how like I work in the sessions that I've done with you guys in psychic readings and things. So we see here, let me just jump forward. So another feature of the hologram is its efficiency. So billions of bits of information are stored in a tiny space. So the pattern, the holographic photograph, is stored everywhere on the plate. So the other thing too, if we're talking about holograms, so say for example, let me just think of something that I can represent. Say for example, oh, actually this is a good one. So my little cup of abundance potion that I have here, imagine that this represents, an image. If I was to accidentally shatter and break this glass, and then we look at one piece holographically, it has the whole pattern for all of the glass. So when we look into a hologram, it's like we're zeroing in on a microscopic type level. So this also means that the absolute, or this collective consciousness that we can tap into, or the quantum field, whatever words you want to use for it, contain the pattern, or contain a program perhaps, or if we're looking into it in branches of reality or timelines as well, we can actually tap into different timelines through doing this kind of work. So this is really, really exciting. Let me bring back up my window. And we're going to come to the consciousness matrix. And let me just read. So this is number 14. And it says, we are a hologram and can tune into greater field of understanding. So yeah, it just goes into talking about like electrostatic fields, holographic images that are being conveyed or projected upon these electrostatic fields. The other thing that I was also postulating, thinking about with this, is if we're looking into plasma, which you guys have not known me to do shows on plasma, and plasma taking up 90-something% of the space around us, that perhaps some of these things, whether we're programming the plasma to bring things into reality, just like how the amazing Vedics and other different cultures and the old school mystics and mediums from the Alice Bailey days would be able to materialize objects. So I do wonder if there's a little bit more of that. I won't go through all of that because I want to be conscious of keeping this to a certain length time. Let me see. So coming to this one. So anyway, there's geometric forms and energy and frequency that are also related to that section. So consciousness process is mostly envisaged if we have the picture of the holographic input with the three-dimensional grid system superimposed over it, and such all of the energy patterns contained within it can be described in three-dimensional geometric or mathematics to reduce the data into a two-dimensional form. So another way that I've heard people talk about this is if we're imagining, a Sims game, and they might be existing in a 2D, but if they were to become like more conscious, they would be able to like access or see things in a third dimensional reality. So when we're able to awaken to higher states of consciousness, we are able to extend the range in the dimensions that we can tap into. So with this, we can bring back information from higher dimensions as well, and look across time and space. We're not restricted. So let me just go here. So to the extent that the gateway succeeds in bringing about refinement in theory matrix of the mind, it succeeds in explaining and altering human consciousness so that we can perceive without recourse to the intercession of the physical sense that evermore the universal hologram. So not, of course, accessible by sense perception. So we talk about this with the homunculus part of the brain before. So it's not something that we can, see in our 3D physical world, but can ultimately be perceived and understood. So Marilyn Ferguson has written a theories of Pilgrim and Boham appear to be account for all of the transcendental experience, paranormal events, and even normal perceptual oddities. Anyway, it says currently he is proposing startling, all-encompassing model that is generating considerable excitement among the intrigue of the mysteries of the human consciousness. So his holographic model, which I would be interested to read this. Let me highlight that bit. So his holographic model research to the theoretical physics is an account for normal perception and simultaneous takes paranormal and transcendental experiences out of the supernatural by explaining them as part of nature. So that's what I love about that section too, is that this is organic. This is how we are supposed to be, and it's how the old mystics worked as well. So we have self-cognition. Let me just see what that is, self-cognition. And that's also, we know that's the difference that separates us from the animal kingdom or certain animals. So we know that, they have consciousness, they have feelings, they have emotions and things. Thank you, Britt Marie. It's a bit harder to read your comments today while going through all of these, but I will be going back and reading them after, and I appreciate all of you for being here. So yeah, with this, the self-cognition that we can really intrinsically gain a different understanding of who we are on a soul level from doing this kind of work. And I think that's something to really be explored in your own personal realization with this kind of work. So we see here a little diagram. And it's here we have consciousness energy grid. So remember my little headphones pick before as well. So let me just bring this up. So remembering the left, the logic connected, logic mind, and then we have the right brain. So the left brain will shut down things. And that's why we want to quieten it. We want to open up more to the creative. So here we see it says the left brain hemisphere consciousness grid. So it acts like the mind's computer software to reduce the input from the right brain. So it's trying to shut down more, like shut out all of the things that the right brain is open to. And I think perhaps being neurodivergent, we have less of a filter or the left logic is operating in a different way. And I know even through looking into brain scans and things that say for reading, for example, for me to read, I'm activating perhaps like 3 different parts of my brain. So imagine taking in the information and it's going zip, zip, zip. Whereas if you're more neurotypical, you're actually just using one cognitive function to absorb and to perhaps remember what you've read. So that's like a way to explain it. But yeah, right hemisphere consciousness grid reduces 3-dimensional holographic image to a 2-dimensional. So go, no go, is what we see. And what have I put here? So yeah, number 18, it's talking about time, space, dimension. So we know that we can sort of be in more places than just one at once when we look at like biolocation, and there's yogis and masters that are able to do this. Let me see if I've put any notes. I've highlighted quite a lot, but yeah, essentially it's talking about like the material universe. We're really like operating outside the 3D and operating outside time and space, just to summarize that. Intervening dimensions. So this is where I've put a little scribble writing about intermittent substrate was a note that I wrote, and plasma and chi. So perhaps like with this, we're able to really have a look at, maybe that's as close as the physical representation. If we talk about plasma being like that, I guess, thing between the solid and the non-solid in reality. Maybe it's just more microscopic, and we're learning more about that as time goes on. But essentially, it's also like tapping into the quantum is what I've written. And going further along, I've put get into coherence with the universe or into the absolute. You'll see here it talks about subatomic particles. It talks about tachyons as well. So if you're into like the science, go and read this. You'll love it. The other thing that I've put is most manifestation and remote viewing happening out of time and space. So when we are remote viewing or looking into future timeline potentials or even past lives, we're accessing out of time and space. So this would also be similar with hypnosis. And this little model here we see is the absolute infinity. And it's talking about those oscillations and the waves that we talk about too. It's also talking about like Planck's theory. So anyway, what you see with these little lines between the waves. So say we're getting into state, and we're starting to synchronize this left and right brain hemisphere. These little like lines are where we've clicked out of a portion of oscillating energy, intermediate mental of like feeling out of body. And this is where we're clicking out of that logic mind, and we're stepping more out into this holographic universe as well. So yeah, you can see that there's a few different things, but they call it the click out. And this, to me, when we look at the gamma brainwave, that, because it's like a tighter wave, just to bring up this little pic again, we can see there's almost like less of a space for clicking out too. So, I find that highly fascinating. So let's move on from there. Oh, and I've put here, perhaps clicking out of body might also be what that feels like, and dimension jumping. So I saw that when I was sort of kind of remote viewing that. It's like we're jumping or traversing into higher states. So imagine if we're a sim and we're tapping into third dimensional reality and like bringing through information and things like that, or clicking out into that space, or clicking down into a two-dimensional space is another interesting way to perhaps look into that. And where are we at? So we also see here as well, where have I put? So a certain space can be covered by energy moving in either a particle or a waveform in certain time, assuming a specific velocity virtually anywhere in time-space universe. So the relationship is neat and predictable. However, in intermediate dimensions beyond time and space, the limitations imposed of energy put into the state of oscillating motion are not uniform as they are in our physical universe. So a myriad of various distortions and incongruencies are thus likely to be encountered, such as our nice, neat assumptions concerning the relationship between time and space. And as we know it, this dimension does not apply. So, but even more important, access to opening to both the past and future, and the dimension current time space is left behind. So yeah, it's like we're superseding or going beyond that. The other thing too that would be interesting to maybe do a show on is like the double split experiment, and look into that. Essentially, when I look into this, we really just gain much faster results from getting out of body, and we can pull upon much more information. This I do feel, and reading this, we'll see another little picture coming up. It does talk about like white holes and black holes as well. And remember, I've done shows on black holes where I talk about a black hole containing information or everything that's ever happened in our universe. So when we're going into this state, perhaps we're tapping into retrieving information from some of these black holes, storage units or storage devices, holographically. So I find that interesting. It more and more leads to thinking that we're in a simulation, we're operating in something that's somewhat like a computer. And when I do remote view it and go outside this matrix, there's sometimes different guardian-like beings that are trying to breadcrumb or give us like information to point us to find out all of this stuff. So I do believe that we're getting into further and further. And I can see Chris also has read it. Awesome. I'm so excited for this. So it is the holy grail for future reality. Hemisync is good prelude to start the process. Yeah, I agree as well. And I can see Lisa saying, I've read this document and I'm interested in the correlation with the Planck theory and the Nassim Harameyn's work in terms of Planck theory. Yeah, it'd be interesting to go and, have a look at all of them. We need more time, don't we? Or I should get out of time space and just do all the work out there. But it is good to have something to reference or to show you guys. So absolute is a perspective. And remember, when we use the word absolute, it's talking about getting into the infinite state of consciousness. So let me just see what we have. What page am I on? Okay. So the other thing that I also do, I don't know if you can see my little, let me bring this up. There's a lot highlighted on this. I'm not going to get into all of it, but I've put law of opposites. So I kept getting a vision around geometry with this and my study of sacred geometry from years and years ago in college. And you've heard me talk about before that we have a law of opposites in our third dimensional reality. So what I kept seeing was it's almost with the brain synchronization and things, because our brain, when we're in beta, I believe, is almost like living a little bit in this two brain type side of things. We're living in our logic, we've maybe perhaps got a little bit of right brain stuff, but if we bring, say, for example, synchronization, where we bring the brain together, we form a triangle. And this is more where we get coherence. And law of opposites, if we think about law of opposites as a model for our current reality, which I talk about as two of one's energy coming up in the cards, we're existing in this dual state of reality at the moment where there's good, there's bad, there's Democrat, there's Republic. We as an experiment can only go so far to an end before we have to come back to this. So I believe we're in this phase of collapsing the duality and coming into a state of coherence. And that's why it feels uncomfortable, because growth will feel uncomfortable. So yeah, I feel that that was the vision I kept getting come up to do with this. Let me just see what part we're at. I want to make sure we're following on the same page. So we've come on to page 15. So I've said we have noted that our minds construct energy fields which interact with various aspects of this hologram to deduce information, which is ultimately processed through the left hemisphere, the logic, to deduce information, so that our brains reduce it to the form where we can employ for the process we call thinking. So we have implied that this hologram is infinite or is a finite embodiment in active energy form as the infinite consciousness of the absolute. And I've also just we've got from Big Bang to Taurus. It talks about quasars in here. Let me just bring it to, where are we at? Distribution of quasars. So it talks about quasi-stellar objects and operating in the premise of the universe smaller. Let me just read it from here, much easier. So I'm talking about the quasars and stellar objects in the universe. Smaller processes tend to be minor images of larger ones. So again, the hologram. So a little shot of the glass having the imprint for the whole. And there's experiments where they did using a laser, they were able to take the DNA of a lizard, I think it was, and through a laser, project that DNA into an egg. So you can actually change form or interfere with the DNA with lasers. So it's not always having to splice and chop and do things on a DNA level. That would be another show too. Anyway, it talks about with this, we have the little patterns of electrons that move around the nucleus of the atom, which mirrors the way planets orbit. So, looking at the planets, we have that stellar hologram. We also have the way that our cells and things work and the way that we exist on a particle level. So let me see if there's anything else. So eventually forming an ovum or an egg. So we'll skip to this coming up briefly. Let me just see. Yeah, it talks about just going in to do with the cosmic egg and the physics model of that. So we see here, this is the nucleus. So they put a black hole on this left side and a white hole on the right side. We have a universal hologram circling this little nucleus, and you see the direction of time and space evolving. So for me, I kept getting that image that we were talking about with, we're in this state of where we're coming back to more that God consciousness, or more that where we're becoming perceptive or aware of higher states. So it's going to change. So essentially, if we talk about the Sims and they're perhaps tapping into higher states of consciousness, it's going to change their physical reality when they start tapping into that, just as like a model that's easy concept to understand. So we see here the cosmic egg. So it's a stylized rendition of this simple torus. Now, doesn't this look like when I've talked about the heart, and we talk about the heart actually being a vortex generator, like Rudolf Steiner talked about, and you've seen me show you the videos where they unravel the heart muscle and you discover it's like a ribbon. So this is taking in this energy or this plasma chi and becoming a vortex generator. So if we think about our beautiful hearts being our perhaps mechanics and the plasma running through it, and how we can connect to the quantum mechanics side of things too. So I do feel that the heart plays a big part in heart-brain coherence, as we talked about at the start. And let me just see where I'm at. Okay, so it also just goes on to talk about hologram. It talks about the quality of consciousness. So it just talks about when we reach a state of sophistication. So imagine that within like the Sims reality as well, that we are able to perceive. So if we become more sophisticated with this, or say, for example, if we're talking about it as a Sim, perceiving itself, you start to perceive your own hologram. So at this point, you reach a point of self-cognition. And I think this is where we're at in our consciousness level now. A lot of us are becoming a little bit more self-aware, or noticing how our thoughts create our reality, as you hear me talk about over and over again. So when energy returns to the state of total rest within the absolute, which happens in the gateway, it returns to the continuum of consciousness in the pool of limitless, timeless perception that resides there. Thus, the more complex the energy system in the material state, the more consciousness it processes to maintain its reality. So our consciousness, therefore, is differentiated aspect of the organization of the energy patterns which constitute our physical body, but it is distinctly separate form and superior to it. So since consciousness exists quite apart from outside of our reality, beyond the bounds of time and space, it is like an absolute, has neither beginning nor end. So it's really that open quantum field. So reality has become, or has both a beginning and an ending, because it is bounded within the time and space. The other thing too, when we're able to sort of look into different studies, and there was a study, I can't remember the name of it, but there is a study where they looked into people that had multiple personality disorder, and what they found was that even eye color, something on a physical level, would change when people were in a different personality. So there was the example of giving someone, say, that had a few personalities, and say maybe like 8 of the personalities were allergic to orange juice. They could give it to the one that wasn't, and their body could assimilate and not break out in hives or a rash, but give it to any of the others and they would break out in hives or rashes. So our belief system and our consciousness is able to do some pretty strange things. So if we can train this and we can put the program in and install it ourselves, you can actually change and shift your eye color when you become really, really good at this. Or if perhaps you've had a fracture or some of the MK Ultra stuff, this is how they create alters as well. So reading this, you'll start to link everything. And I can see Chris saying, we are born into 5D and die in 5D. Unfortunately, we are dumbed down into 3D. We are in the great remembering in our ascension journey. Thank you for putting that statement up. That is a really good one as well. And John saying, I found out the missing page 25 has to do with astral projection. I have it, so I'm going to share that with you guys too. So let me see. All right, so yeah, have a play around with that. And it's interesting when we can talk about, changing eye color and things. Not that you want to change, but, changing and shifting other things can be really good, allergies and such. So let me see where we're at in this. Okay. So we see quality of consciousness. We just talked about consciousness and perspective. So I've also put a little note here around remote viewing and channeling. So since memory is functioned of consciousness and therefore enjoys the same eternal character of consciousness, which accounts for the existence, it must be admitted that consciousness returns to the absolute. So it brings with us, and this is what Chris was just saying as well about that 5D, and then we return to it. So it says here that it does not imply extinction of separate entity with the consciousness organized and sustained in reality. Rather, it suggests a differentiated consciousness which merges and participates into the universal consciousness and the infinity of the absolute without losing its separate identity. So interesting to talk about us as little souls here and how we can create collective shift with our soul tribe. And I know a few of you have joined me and we spoke this morning, which was so beautiful to chat with you guys, how your 16-hour manifestation went. And I really enjoyed, and I might even do a show on this where we can participate a little bit more. But this morning in the catch up from what happened in our 16-hour manifestation challenge was we also talked about how each of us differently manifest or what works for us. So it was really, really interesting. A lot of us were getting into that space of already having it or a higher knowing or heart frequency. So what we see here is, and I'll just reduce this down so you can see it whole. We've got at the top, this is a model for our galaxy. So right at the top of what looks to be like the heart shape, we have galactic north, and down the bottom of the arrow, galactic south. We're in that little center where it says our galaxy, and you see there's a torus field. So what this document talks about is as you near that end, and if you imagine this to be an egg with the little top point pointed down, this would be a cosmic egg. We're at a point right now where we're emerging towards this top. So as I talked about, that same sort of vision where we're getting faster and faster. So imagine at the bottom, things are much slower. We're still in this learning phase, and there's a quickening that takes place and happens. So yeah, I do liken that. If you read that to where we're at, I was able to sort of more get a model for that. But yeah, you can see the white hole, you can see the nucleus and the torus field. So again, tapping in, because we know it's holographic, the cosmic egg tapping into our torus field as well. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. So we have here where we're getting to the gateway process. So essentially coming back to remembering what we've just talked about, like with having that synchronization, it talks about that. It talks about like expanding our consciousness. So this is also done through playing pink or white noise. So it's quite common to put white noise on to occupy the brain, to switch it out. They also utilize pink noise as well as, sounds of nature and different things in some of the videos. The other thing too that I found was it also talks about when it's referencing like the other different cultures, like Vedic practice. And there's a lot to do with stimulating your nervous system. The other thing I think I spoke about briefly at the start was doing a hum, or some of these ancient practices would actually hum, and then they would be able to trigger or internalize that brainwave synchronization instead of putting in the little headphones. So it's interesting when you look into my work around the psychic senses and the sinus cavity, because this is where we hum and we vibrate this into the sphenoid bone. And you've heard me speak many times before with the sphenoid bone, and you've seen me hold up my little Gray's or giant Gray's Anatomy book. It's a butterfly-shaped bone. And what does a butterfly represent? Going from a physical caterpillar state into a higher state of consciousness where we're using our wings. We've gone through that metamorphosis. So I do believe there is something to projecting these frequencies and sounds to helping us get up into higher states. In the Chinese acupuncture system, a lot of these points that I have actually documented in my book, the Soul Star book, you actually will find the acupuncture points. And I've named them, located them in that book. So these will also trigger and help shift us in terms of reality as well. So let me just see. So we just have Hemisync explained, which I will show you the websites and that. I won't get too much into it. Let me see. It's just giving you different things. Essentially, we're training ourselves to get out of body, out of the terrestrial sphere, and into advanced techniques, problem solving, patterning. Patterning is actually quite important. So this is where we begin to manifest our desires as well when we look into patterning. So I've highlighted the little section at the bottom, and let me see if I can bring it up. So in other words, the technique of patterning recognizes the fact that since our consciousness is the source of all reality, our thoughts have the power to influence the development of reality in time and space. As it is more complicated, the objective thought and the more radically it departs from our reality sphere to accommodate desires. Oh, sorry, I think I missed that. Hold on a sec. Radically, it departs from our current reality. The more the universal hologram will need to reorientate our reality sphere to accommodate our desires. So we have to shift our reality sphere. So Monroe trainers caution against attempting to force the pace of this process because the individual could succeed in dislocating his existing reality with drastic consequences. So you'll also see this talked about in like quantum jump. So a quantum jump essentially is where we shift at a dramatic pace. So we have like a massive change. So whether you're doing like self-concept work and you're shifting and your whole reality opens up, or you unlock like a whole new level. So this can be dangerous sometimes in terms of if you don't want to lose other parts of your reality, because if you're shifting who you are and then others are no longer vibrating on that same wavelength, you might fall out of love, you might fall out of frequency or alignment with, you know, your job, your relationships, friends, different things like that. So yeah, definitely caution around that. We also see it talks about an energy bar tool, remote viewing, the living body map. So these are things that you can go in and also read. And it goes on to talk about traveling in the past and the future, out of body movement. So then it goes on to the role of REM sleep, information collected, potential, and belief system considerations. And I've gone in here, I want to read this quote to you. So the secret oral teachings of the Tibetan Buddhist sects have, from which the following quote was taken. So I wanted to read this quote. I think sometimes when they've included a quote, it can encapsulate. So it says, "The tangible world is movement, says the masters, not the collection of moving objects, but the movement itself. There are no objects in movements. It is the movement which constitutes the objects which appear to us. There are nothing but movement. This movement is the continued and infinitely rapid succession of flashes of energy, in Tibetan chasel or shraub, all objects perceivable to our senses, all phenomena of whatever kind and whatever aspect that may assume, are constituted by rapid succession of instantaneous events. So I also think about what we talked about the other day in, with the Matrix, with the spoon. So essentially, you don't want to focus your attention on the movement itself, or you don't want to focus your attention on the spoon. You want to focus on the unbecoming of it, or that you are that. So if we relate this back to self-concept work and shifting or quantum jumping, this is really where we bring back that vibration or feeling. And I talked about, this was one of my experiences in the 16-hour manifestation event that we just did, was that I actually had mirrored to me this out-of-body, beautiful, like bliss-like state. And I saw a whole nother version of me. And at first I didn't recognize her. So it was like quite comical. I'm like, oh my God, that's me. So yeah, I feel that quote was quite important. So in the heaven of Indara, there is also said to be a network of pearls so arranged that if you look at one, you will see all others reflected into it. So it does go on to talk about that as another quote in here, just right there. And we see here, we have the motivational aspect and the conclusion. So in conclusion, there is a sound rational basis in terms of physical science parameters for considering Gateway to be the plausible in terms for its essential objectives. Institutional insight is not only personal but practical, and professional nature would seem to be within bounds of reasonable expectations. However, a phased approach for entering the Gateway experiences is an accelerated mode for which would be required if the time needed to reach advanced states in altered consciousness is brought within more manageable limits from the standpoint of establishing an organization-wide explanation or exploration of Gateway's potential. The most promising approach suggested in foregoing study involves the following steps. So let me just bring this up. So A, begin by using the Gateway hemisync tapes to achieve enhanced brain focused and induce hemispherical synchronization. Then B, add strong REM frequencies to induce left brain quiescence and deep physical relaxation. C, provide hypnotic suggestions designed to enable the individual to induce deep or auto-hypnotic state at will. And you've seen me do that on a few shows where we talk about the 3, 2, 1 countdown, picking something to look at in your roof sort of eye line, and then counting down 3, 2, 1, eyes becoming heavy, and giving that program of feeling deeply relaxed. You do that 3 times, each time dropping and saying sleep now. So you've seen me talk about that before. So we also have D, use auto-hypnotic suggestions to obtain much enhanced focus of concentration and motivation in rapidly progressing through focus 12 exercises. E, then repeat steps A and B using the auto-hypnotic suggestion that out-of-body movement will occur and be remembered. So repeating steps E to achieve facility in gaining out-of-body state under consciousness control after hypnotically suggesting to reduce ability to consciously control out-of-body movement and maintaining it for the REM sleep states. And G, focus 15 and 21 objectives, escape the time-space reality. And I'm not going to read all of them because we do have some other things, and it really becomes quite wordy was what I found. But essentially, you'll also find on the back, the bibliographies. Let me just pop this window down, and I'm going to get into, let me just see where we're at. So the little bit of the history as well you'll find on the Monroe Institute, which will fill it out and give you a little bit more info on the binaural beats, what they're pretty much doing within the brain. But essentially the binaural beat of 5 hertz, for example, will cause an increase in the theta brainwave production to the listener, stimulating meditative consciousness. we also have, there's like a little program that they can do. And one of my gorgeous clients has just done it recently and absolutely loved it. Said she's had a few things shift and change in her life since. And I know that you guys have been waiting for, let me just stop my screen share for a second. Make sure I've got the right page. Oh, here we are. Oh, and I did have one other thing to show after this. Hold on a sec, guys. Sorry. Looking for my button. There it is. So let's have a look into this. So this is page 25. And what I did write down is just sort of like a synopsis of what I sort of found within it. So essentially, the most important information that I got from this was it talks about a little bit on religion, a little bit on our reality. It talks about the pineal being activated when our brains are balanced. So that was probably the most important thing that I got from this, and talks about self-knowledge, left brain limitations. So essentially, this is more to do with the importance of the pineal. And remember, we said before about the mystic also using the right brain approach. And this is one of the most important things, is to know thyself. So that is really important. When we know thyself too, we also are creating our reality a lot more consciously. So yeah, the other thing that I've written notes on around this, and I still had like other papers and things that I've written, but I don't want to bring too much confusion to it because there is so much information that we got through. And if you're still here with me now, I'm so grateful. So thank you. But yeah, if we were going to put this into a workable model that we want to incorporate or hack and get to like the short version of this, let me just bring my screen up. Essentially, you want to first be comfortable. You want to tap into your breath work, tap into deep breathing or cyclical breathing, because that will bring your brain into the deepest state. You can enhance this by listening to binaural beats or hemisync. You want to set your intention as well if you're working with something specifically. And then you also want to become less particle, so less like in this physical. Thank you, beautiful Seema. So grateful to have you here. And then we're really trying to collapse this wave. And I think it's when we get into the gamma that's where we're collapsing it. So maybe using binaural beats with your left and your right set up correctly. Also, you can go onto Spotify. There is free samples of the gateway, or sorry, of hemisync from the Monroe Institute that are on there. So we can potentially, you might want to try out like the theta first. But yeah, if you want to just like jump in, you can do the gamma. Let's see if there is something else that we need to look at through the cards as well. And I might even go and post, you know what? I'm going to upload and put that page, the missing page, onto my Facebook page. And I might even share it on Maison Jupiter as well in the community, because I know a few of you don't have Facebook. So let's have a look why we were being guided to decode and look into this so deeply. And I'm also, for those of you that watch the Mystical Oracle readings, I will be going live tomorrow at my 11 a.m., which is usual time. But usually we would do it today. But with such a big show today, I didn't want to do too much because we had our event this morning too. So let's flip over these cards and have a look. We have abundance, 3 of cups. So this is about like really accessing our higher states to receive information so that we have more control of creating our reality, was why Spirit guided us so much on this topic. So 3 of cups, abundance, coming together also with like-minded souls, perhaps even collectively manifesting. So we see the 9 of cups, Jupiter. We're being pointed to this information now because we're at that point to come together into higher states of connection and consciousness. We're at a cycle of completion. So we also see here how it's aligning on a spiritual level all the way down into the physical. So there's something else happening in this holographic template that we're about to embody. So the 4 of Wands, the card of completion, the 10 of Cups, which we also see has this higher Mary Magdalene high consciousness energy to it. This is wishes fulfilled. So essentially, we're being given the manual to tap into our creator energy again as well. And we also have Ace of Swords, so we can download new information, we can download and put out new programs as well. And Queen of Swords, that beautiful, fearless liberation and freedom. So that's why we were being guided to explore and look into this today. I'm just checking my notes if there's anything that we've missed. Also, with these frequencies that we're using, this helps us to align with the energetic continuum of the earth. So it's also further making us aware of the Schumann resonance and frequency. And I also want to play for you this content creator had, let me just pop this down and then up again because I want the sound. This content creator that I'm about to share with you actually states the words that are said when you go into the gateway tapes. So this is a statement that's said to not only help you get to a certain level, but also protection.
To yourself every day when you wake up and right before you go to bed, okay? Because it's a reminder that you are divine. I am more than my physical body. Because I am more than physical matter, I deeply desire to expand, to experience, to know, to understand, to control, to use such greater energies and energy systems as may be beneficial and constructive to me and to those near and close to me. Also, I deeply desire the help and cooperation, the assistance, the understanding of those individuals whose wisdom, development, and experience are equal or greater than my own. This is you accepting. You're asking all of the energies that work for you to assist you on your journey. Say this activation to.
Let me just turn this. So yeah, hopefully you guys have enjoyed today, and I would love to hear, I know this video is about to finish, but if you want to put in and come back to this, like maybe after you've read the document, or if you had any epiphanies around this, because I really want our community to shift into this space of being a collective soul tribe of where we're all learning together. And that's really the biggest thing that we got out of the 16-hour I guess like our little group chat where we were talking on video, and then we came back this morning, which is your nighttime over there, to talk about like what it was. And it really, what I got out of it the most was the just gorgeous, generous hearts and souls. And I know John and I were just like quickly talking after. It was so beautiful how supportive and loving this community is. So please share, like if you guys have insights around anything that I've talked about today, or anything to do with getting up and out of our local into that more quantum field. I would love to hear how it is that you manifest, what it is that works for you. And definitely, Lisa, I did record the manifestation challenge, and because you were one of the beautiful souls that had bought some potions, I've sent you the email link as well. And it is one that we're not going to put up for everyone to view on YouTube, because it's only for the people that did show up. I don't want to like encroach on anyone's privacy, and I appreciate each and every one of you so much. There's so many comments. Let me just see. Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so happy. Thanks, guys. And yeah, perhaps we'll have some more insights and things further down the track. Please do remember to share this out to anyone that might be interested in this research or information. I still have my sessions available. If you guys want to book a session, please use Jupiter in all caps when booking a session with me on Mason Jupiter. And we also have my beautiful potions on Soul Alchemy Potions. So yeah, please head on over to there. And I will see you guys tomorrow for the mystical soul readings. Have a beautiful night. Thank you, everyone.